But tomorrow is no better in terms of weather. The deluge continues as if the game makers are intent on washing us all away. The thunder's so powerful it seems to shake the ground. Peeta's considering heading out anyway to scavenge for food, but I tell him in the storm it would be pointless. He won't be able to see 3 feet in front of his face, and he'll only end up getting soaked to the skin for his troubles. He knows I'm right, but the gnawing in our stomachs is becoming painful. The day drags on, turning into evening, and there's no break in the weather. Hamish is our only hope, but nothing is forthcoming, either from lack of money, everything will cost an exorbitant amount, or because he's dissatisfied with our performance. Probably the latter. I'd be the first to admit we're not exactly riveting today. Starving, weak from injuries, trying not to reopen wounds. We're sitting huddled together, wrapped in the sleeping bag. Yes, but mostly to keep warm. The most exciting thing either of us does is nap. I'm not really sure how to ramp up the romance. The kiss last night was nice, but working up to another will take some forethought. There are girls in the seam, some of the merchant girls too, who navigate these waters so easily, but I've never had much time or use for it. Anyway, just a kiss isn't enough anymore, clearly, because if it was, we'd have gotten food last night. My instincts tell me Hamish isn't just looking for physical affection. He wants something more, something personal. The sort of stuff he was trying to get me to tell about myself when we were practicing for the interview. I'm rotten at it, but Peeta's not. Maybe the best approach is to get him talking. Peeta, I say lightly, you said at the interview you'd had a crush on me forever. When did forever start? Oh, I guess the first day of school. We were 5. You had on a red plaid dress and your hair it was in 2 braids instead of 1. My father pointed you out when we were waiting to line up, Peeta says. Your father? Why, I ask. He said, see that little girl? I wanted to marry her mother, but she ran off with a coal miner, Peeta says. What? You're making that up, I exclaim. No, true story, Peeta says. And I said, a coal miner? Why did she want a coal miner if she could have had you? And he said, because when he sings, even the birds stop to listen. That's true. They do. I mean, they did, I say. I'm stunned and surprisingly moved, thinking of the baker telling this to Peeta. It strikes me that my own reluctance to sing, my own dismissal of music, might not really be that I think it's a waste of time. It might be because it reminds me too much of my father. So that day in music assembly, the teacher asked who knew the Valley song. Your hand shot right up in the air. She stood you up on a stool and had you sing it for us. And I swear, every bird outside the windows fell silent, Peeta says. Oh, please, I say, laughing. No, it happened. And right when your song ended, I knew, just like your mother, I was a goner, Peeta says. Then, for the next 11 years, I tried to work up the nerve to talk to you. Without success, I add. Without success. So, in a way, my name being drawn in the reaping was a real piece of luck, says Peeta. For a moment, I'm almost foolishly happy, and then confusion sweeps over me. Because we're supposed to be making up this stuff, playing at being in love, not actually being in love. But Peeta's story has a ring of truth to it. That part about my father and the birds. And I did sing the first day of school, although I don't remember the song. And that red plaid dress, there was one, a hand-me-down to Prim that got washed to rags after my father's death. It would explain another thing, too, why Peeta took a beating to give me the bread on that awful hollow day. So if those details are true, could it all be true? You have a remarkable memory, I say haltingly. I remember everything about you, says Peeta, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. You're the one who wasn't paying attention. I am now, I say. Well, I don't have much competition here, he says. I want to draw away, to close those shutters again, but I know I can't. It's as if I can hear Hamish whispering in my ear, say it, say it. I swallow hard and get the words out. You don't have much competition anywhere, and this time it's me who leans in. Our lips have just barely touched when the clunk outside makes us jump. My bow comes up, the arrow ready to fly, but there's no other sound. Peeta peers through the rocks and then gives a whoop. Before I can stop him, he's out in the rain, then handing something into me, a silver parachute attached to a basket. I rip it open at once, and inside there's a feast. Fresh rolls, goat cheese, apples, and best of all, a tureen of that incredible lamb stew on wild rice. The very dish I told Caesar Flickerman was the most impressive thing the capital had to offer. Peeta wriggles back inside, his face lit up like the sun. I guess Hamish finally got tired of watching us starve. I guess so, I answer. But in my head, I can hear Hamish's smug, if slightly exasperated words. Yes, that's what I'm looking for, sweetheart. Chapter 23. Every cell in my body wants me to dig into the stew and cram it handful by handful into my mouth, but Peta's voice stops me. We better take it slow on that stew. Remember the first night on the train? The rich food made me sick, and I wasn't even starving then. You're right, and I can just inhale the whole thing, I say regretfully, but I don't. We are quite sensible. We each have a roll, half an apple, and an egg-sized serving of stew and rice. I make myself eat the stew in tiny spoonfuls. They even send us silverware and plates, savoring each bite. When we finish, I stare longingly at the dish. I want more. Me too. Tell you what, we wait an hour. If it stays down, then we get another serving, Peta says. Agreed, I say, but it's going to be a long hour. Maybe not that long, says Peta. What was that you were saying just before the food arrived? Something about me, no competition, best thing that ever happened to you. I don't remember that last part, I say, hoping it's too dim in here for the cameras to pick up my blush. Oh, that's right. That's what I was thinking, he says. Scoot over, I'm freezing. I make room for him in the sleeping bag. We lean back against the cave wall, my head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around me. I can feel Hamish nudging me to keep up the act. So, since we were 5, you never even noticed any other girls? I ask him. No, I noticed just about every girl, but none of them made a lasting impression but you, he says. I'm sure that would thrill your parents, you liking a girl from the seam, I say. Hardly, but I couldn't care less. Anyway, if we make it back, you won't be a girl from the seam. You'll be a girl from the victor's village, he says. That's right. If we win, we'll each get a house in the part of town reserved for Hunger Games victors. Long ago, when the games began, the capital had built a dozen fine houses in each district. Of course, in ours, only one is occupied. Most of the others have never been lived in at all. A disturbing thought hits me. But then our only neighbor would be Hamish. Ah, that'll be nice, says Peta, tightening his arms around me. You and me and Hamish, very cozy. Picnics, birthdays, long winter nights around the fire retelling old Hunger Games tales. I told you, he hates me, I say, but I can't help laughing at the image of Hamish becoming my new pal. Only sometimes. When he's sober, I've never heard him say one negative thing about you, says Peta. He's never sober, I protest. That's right. Who am I thinking of? Oh, I know. It's Cinna who likes you. But that's mainly because you didn't try to run when he set you on fire, says Peta. On the other hand, Hamish, well, if I were you, I'd avoid Hamish completely. He does hate you. I thought you said I was his favorite, I say. He hates me more, says Peta. I don't think people in general are his sort of thing. I know the audience will enjoy our having fun at Hamish's expense. He's been around so long, he's practically an old friend to some of them. And after his head dive off the stage at the reaping, everybody knows him. By this time, they'll have dragged him out of the control room for interviews about us. No telling what sort of lies he's made up. He's at something of a disadvantage because most mentors have a partner, another victor to help them, whereas Hamish has to be ready to go into action at any moment. Kind of like me when I was alone in the arena. I wonder how he's holding up with the drinking, the attention, and the stress of trying to keep us alive. It's funny, Hamish and I don't get along well in person, but maybe Peta is right about us being alike because he seems able to communicate with me by the timing of his gifts. Like how I knew I must be close to water when he withheld it, and how I knew the sleep syrup just wasn't something to ease Peta's pain, and how I know now that I have to play up the romance. He hasn't made much effort to connect with Peta, really. Perhaps he thinks a bowl of broth would just be a bowl of broth to Peta, whereas I'll see the strings attached to it. That hits me, and I'm amazed the question's taken so long to surface. Maybe it's because I've only recently begun to view Hamish with a degree of curiosity. How do you think he did it? Who? Did what? Peta asked. Hamish, how do you think he won the games, I say. Peta considers this quite a while before he answers. Hamish is sturdily built, but no physical wonder like Cato or Thresh. He's not particularly handsome, not in the way that causes sponsors to rain gifts on you. And he's so surly, it's hard to imagine anyone teaming up with him. There's only one way Hamish could have won, and Peta says it just as I'm reaching this conclusion myself. He outsmarted the others, says Peta. I nod, then let the conversation drop. But secretly, I'm wondering if Hamish sobered up long enough to help Peta and me because he thought we just might have the wits to survive. Maybe he wasn't always a drunk. Maybe in the beginning he tried to help the tributes, but then it got unbearable. It must be hell to mentor 2 kids and then watch them die, year after year after year. I realize that if I get out of here, that will become my job, to mentor the girl from District 12. The idea is so repellent, I thrust it from my mind.